Welcome. Hope everyone's enjoying the day. My name is Allison Chang. I have my Master's of Social Work. I'll be starting my PhD in the fall with a focus on neurodevelopmental disorders. I have a 15-year-old son who is diagnosed with ADHD and autism. And our topic today, when I asked him about coming to Family Day today, he said, I can't because I have too much coding to do. He's coding a video game. And our topic is the use of electronic screens in children and youth with neurodevelopmental conditions. So a topic I'm very interested in. And I'll introduce our panel to you. So Shay, here is a 17-year-old student finishing grade 11 at the YMCA Academy High School in Toronto, diagnosed as autistic at age 4 at Hall and Bloorview. He's a passionate advocate for neurodiverse youth and lives in Toronto with his mom and awesome little brother. Alfredo, we are in different orders. Alfredo Arias is an entrepreneur and father of 2 boys, one of whom has various neurodevelopmental disorders. He brings a perspective of a family dedicated to achieving the best outcomes for their children while navigating the challenges of day-to-day life and the healthcare system in Ontario. He's contributed to and led projects at the annual Brain Hack event held at the Krembil Center for Neuroinformatics, including 2 utilizing large language models and a hardware gamma stimulator. Alfredo holds a degree in economics and is an active member of the Participant Advisory Committee for POND, as well as myself. Azadeh Kushki is the Canada Research Chair in Neurodiversity and Personalized Health, Associate Chief of Data Science at the Hall and Bloorview Research Institute, Senior Scientist at the Hall and Bloorview, Associate Professor at the Institute of Biomedical Engineering at the University of Toronto, and she's the Analytics Lead for POND. Dr. Kushki's research focuses on the application of data science approaches to characterize neurodevelopmental diversity and to enhance personalized healthcare for neurodiverse children. And Dr. Jennifer Crosby is a clinical psychologist and health clinician scientist within the Department of Psychiatry at SickKids. Dr. Crosby is a senior scientist in the Neuroscience and Mental Health program at SickKids Research Institute, an associate professor at the University of Toronto. Dr. Crosby's research and clinical work are focused on understanding the neurobiological determinants of childhood neuropsychiatric disorders with a particular focus on ADHD. So our panel. So we're interested in your feedback. There's going to be some questions that pop up, so you can scan the QR code and then go ahead and answer the questions. And we'll have a few polls throughout our talk today. And so screen time is a controversial subject. So our first question is, with respect to socialization, do you feel that screen time is helpful or harmful for youth with neurodevelopmental disorders?
So much race. Yeah. For you, if you're considering like sort of teens through to really.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we thought it. Age range, maybe, yeah, 6-ish, maybe up till, yeah. We didn't specify. Youth? Yeah. Okay, so speaking of screen time, well, let's talk about screen time. We'll start with Shay. So Shay, what kind of screens or technology do you like to use as a youth?
Oh, like just for in general?
Yeah, for yourself. Do you want to use the microphone so we can hear you? Yeah.
All right, is this good?
Yeah.
Okay. So I mainly use social media on my phone, Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram for communication, or I watch like different videos like every day when I come home after school. I think it really helps me like calm down after, like a long stressful day with work. But I also use my phone for messages to stay in touch with people as like a way of communication.
And do you find it's valuable? It's a valuable tool then for you?
Yes, because it helps me communicate with all my friends that I haven't been in touch with for a long time. So yeah, I think it's really helpful for me.
Good. And Alfredo, we'll get parent perspective. What has been your experience with your kids?
Everybody hear me?
No. Okay. Still no.
It's ironic we're talking about technology and it's not working.
Okay, so I think that the blessings are there. There's no way I can deny everything that's wonderful about this era. Hello. Okay, so what I'm saying is that the blessings are still there. I can certainly recognize everything that's good about technology. We're having, it's been tough in many respects. The biggest thing is how hard it is for kids to switch off the technology. These transitions are, I think, hit us especially hard. There's a lot of things I could say about how parents end up using, especially when there's two kids and you have one kid that has higher needs, how you stick the screen on the other kid and how that can compound over time. So that has been our experience as well. And just generally a distancing between parents and kids. It makes being a parent much harder. And again, I feel like our generation got hit disproportionately at this. We're treating this, I believe, from a science point of view, we're looking more at something like substance abuse. And if we use that framework of substance abuse, all of a sudden a lot of things come into light, all this hyperdependence, all this withdrawal, etc. And we see it and we pay the price.
Thank you. Jennifer, as a clinician, what are some of your thoughts around using screen time as a tool for socialization and regulation and supporting parents?
Yes.
No.
Very loud. Here we go. Is that better? Great. Okay. Can you just repeat the questions about socializing and parent tools?
So what are your thoughts around using screen time as a tool for socialization or regulation?
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think what our previous panelists have both touched on this. It's hard to make a blanket statement. Technology is here and there's lots of it. And I think it really depends on the type of technology and the individual. So our previous talk, I think, touched on this nicely, like different people have different needs. And for sure, I think Alfredo hit the nail on the head. Our current access to technology makes it very hard to stay up on what's happening. And I think there are definitely aspects of technology that are very hard to manage for anyone, but definitely individuals with neurodiversity, it makes it even harder. But I think there are ways that it can be quite positive. It can be used responsibly. And for both youth and parents, it's all about finding that balance. And very rarely is there sort of an all or none answer around what's the best practice. And so I think it requires a lot of constant communication and updating, which can be hard and frustrating as kids get older to see how they use it. But definitely, technology and screens are often used for socializing, and socializing is very important right across the spectrum. And I think while sometimes it's easy as a parent to be sort of just take away the screens carte blanche. It can be difficult. And so sort of thinking about that and trying to have a plan can be really important. So while definitely there are challenges, sort of acknowledging what can be beneficial and in what element can be really important for parents. So figuring out what might be a useful, beneficial use of screen times and what doses, while also acknowledging that, just carte blanche is also detrimental. And I'm happy to say a little bit more about that sort of as we get farther into the conversation.
Great, thank you. As a day, what has your research shown around screen time and kids' mental health?
So I'll just comment on everything else that's been said. So I'm an engineer, and as an engineer, we don't create technology to be good and evil. Technology is just a medium to deliver content. So what makes screen time harmful or not harmful is what content you're consuming, how you're using it, and who's using it. And we know this changes. So this changes with age. We know that technology or screen time increases with age. We know that the benefits may change with age. The harms definitely change with age. We know a lot about social media and mental health, for example. I guess from the research studies that we've done a couple of research studies, one pre-COVID and then one during COVID. There were sort of 3 or 4 areas that came up as benefits, and Shay touched on those. One is recreation. So Marie was talking about downtime. For many of our kids, technology can be a way to have that downtime. It's relatively inexpensive, so it's accessible for families who may not be able to afford, organize sports or other types of recreation for kids. And in fact, our studies show that technology use is probably higher in lower income households. There is the socialization. I think our social norms are changing. So many of our kids keep in touch with other kids with their phones. It's not like, our generation where we just went out and knocked on people's doors. I think a lot of this is becoming electronic, especially coming out of COVID. Many of our kids are also using technology for education, and I think that's really huge. Most of our kids in the classrooms at school right now are using technology. And for neurodivergent kids, I think there are lots of benefits in terms of making that content accessible, helping kids consume that content in their own time if they need to slow it down or change it. And then just one last thing I want to comment on is from the families, what we've heard from families is that there are also benefits for the families. So parents use technology as a reward mechanism, but sometimes if we need to, we can also use it as a child-minding sort of tool. And I'm saying that my own kid is in the audience right now, probably on his screen. So I'm saying that as a parent as well.
Thank you. And everyone, I can see you're filling in on the poll. That's great. So I see a lot of benefit in my house, but I also, as a parent, have a lot of concern. So our next question is looking at our concerns around electronic use. So I'll invite Jennifer and maybe Alfredo to answer this next question. And what does it look like when screen time gets out of control?
I think it starts breaking fundamental rights of children. When we talk about the well-defined fundamental rights, and you look down the list, you can see just red flags. Things just like everything. I mean, it would be its own topic, but that's the bottom line, is that we're not giving a child what he or she needs to develop.
Sort of picking up that, we've talked about there's some pros, and like anything, when something is too much, it can be problematic. So anytime that screens are interfering with other sort of developmentally important elements, it's too much. So it shouldn't be interfering with eating. It shouldn't be interfering with sleeping. It shouldn't be interfering with like schoolwork. Shouldn't be interfering with meaningful actual social encounters with family and with friends. And of course, in the neurodiverse population, that kind of social interaction may vary by what people can manage and what they're interested in. But those are real areas, sort of to your point, that you do have to keep an eye. For the benefits that we have, there are definitely things that become problematic. And I had earlier made a comment about, it can be a really important and valuable social communication tool. But there are definitely, monitoring of that's important, and there can definitely be some negatives. So being mindful of how much screen time, the type of screen time, what's developmentally appropriate, and being able to come up with or provide families with tools to manage it when it's becoming too much is really important, because we can touch on it farther on if we have time, but we definitely do see when things get too much, it does start to have a pretty steep impact on mental health, and can start to have impacts on physical as well.
So you've answered my next question, but maybe as a day you want to also add to, is it the number of hours or what kids are consuming that's more problematic?
So it's definitely both. What kids are consuming can be very concerning, especially with sort of the lack of controls on the open internet, the social media content. We know a lot about bullying on social media, for example, so those could be very harmful. The number of hours also matters. So from our studies, we've heard from parents that screen time can interfere with other priorities in life. So for example, physical activity is a big one, sleep is a big one, education is a big one, and then the social connection piece is another one. The social connection is an interesting one because we've heard sort of mixed feedback on that, especially for our neurodivergent kids. Is it the technology is a cause of social isolation, or is it a symptom of social isolation? And is it a way that kids can have that social connections, but through other means? You.
I think a big problem has to do with the incentives that are there for the companies. The way the keyword is engagement, and engagement from a CEO's point of view is very different from what we as parents desire. At the end of the day, there's only so many minutes of eyeballs that they can resell. It's really what they're doing. They're reselling our kids, and there's no regulatory framework that really cares about this. And we are all so busy. This caught us all too early, this generation. Our generation is probably the last generation that will live like this. I grew up without seatbelts. I grew up with people smoking in planes. That's just how it was. And I think we're repeating history here. But until we get the incentives aligned, until government has to step in, this is what you study in economics, when you have something that is inefficient, there's needs and there's a cost that's being borne, especially by us, which is not being taken into calculation of how you set up everything in tech.
Thank you. So as parents, we're always looking for strategies, and I will hope to have a long list to go home with today for managing. But let's start with Shay. How do you manage your screen time?
I manage it by, I think, like putting it down when I'm asked to after I reach a certain limit on the screens. And I think I manage it really well because I never put technology in my room or anything, because I know I will experience a lack of sleep or like potentially not getting any sleep at all, which could impact my learning at school. But I think with technology as well, I just put it down without someone like needing like to ask me to put it away. So
Do you look and see how much screen time you're using? Do you ever track that?
sometimes I do,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Great. And Alfredo, what strategies then do you use at home with your kids?
We do have a nuclear bomb. And the nuclear bomb is my phone, which can turn off devices individually. And I'm sure like a lot of you've learned a lot of best practices for parenting for how to do this thing. So we've tried to do all of them, but at the end of the day, there comes a stick. And luckily, we've gotten to the point with a lot of help from the health community, but we've gotten to the point where we can just say, hey, we're going to turn it off, and 80% of the time that's enough. So if you can, the minute it's self-regulated, that's a whole different story than the parent being mean. But it's this kind of thing, schedules. It's very hard to monitor the individual content. And like I said, the incentives are there to push harmful content a lot of times. But control time. We try to control content. We try to instill breaks. Those are the main ones.
Mhm. And Jennifer and Ezadeh, what do we know that works for strategies?
I don't know if we know definitively what works. I think what we hear a lot is that most strategies do need to be individualized and they change a bit developmentally. Alfredo's already mentioned several that I think are really effective. Having clear breaks, times when it's appropriate and inappropriate to be on screens as a family, and that can vary by a family. And just turning things off. In my house, the internet just turns off at 11:30, and it was originally instituted for my son, but I joke a little bit, but it's also good for me. Like sometimes I'm doing something at 11:30 and the internet goes off, and I was like, okay, this is a sign that I need to like shut things down. So, I think some of those reminders are very good, and you can get a lot of pushback. But as a parent, as people here can understand, as when you can do that kind of thing and not have to physically get into an argument with your youth or your child, it makes it much easier. And if it just happens every day and it just is almost like disembodied, that can be really helpful. And I think for some families they might need to do that pretty regularly through the day, who knows, but I think having breaks through meals, certain times of days when you can do it, when dad is on, when dad is off, these can be really very helpful tools. And it really kind of depends on the individual. Also, as you were saying, you can get quite prescriptive. So, how much time children and youth can use on certain types of social media, that can make a big difference. So you don't have to turn all of your internet or your data off, but they only get an hour on this kind of game or an hour on that kind of game. So it can be a bit frustrating because sometimes the different challenges, can be hard on the different apps, but sometimes the easiest is just actually kind of turning the internet off or whatever you have to do and managing it that way. So there are different strategies, but figuring it out, and it does change over time. And I think the schools are starting to come around a little bit, but I know there's a lot of variation in that as well as to how much they're engaging with reducing and limiting screen time in the school system. Ezadeh?
I mean, those are amazing strategies. I think it also changes with age. So for younger kids, definitely turning off internet, all of that, it's worked really well, at least for us. But as they get older, it's very difficult to control what they're consuming. So for example, they could go to school and watch something on somebody else's phone. At our house, we've gotten to a point where they started recording stuff when they do have internet and then watching it when the internet is off. So I think part of it is just having those conversations and education, like just educating our kids about why it's important not to have a lot of screen time, what the harms could be, and just really openly discussing those and helping them sort of have that level of responsibility where they understand what the limits should be.
And just to pick up on that, I mean, I think really, and Shay, you said it really nicely, and I know when we were preparing for this, you mentioned it. You sort of see the value in not having technology in your room. You said that. You were like, I know if the technology is in my room, then it's going to be a problem. And so I think a lot of these strategies as parents that we use, what ideally you're getting to is sort of helping to show why having these periods can be helpful, because ultimately we do need to help children and youth develop the skills to make choices. And it's hard though, because the technology, like there are forces that are constantly emerging to kind of get individuals back on it. So I think, really kind of staying the course as parents, being good models for that as well, putting our own phones down and managing it. And it's tempting with work and all that, but to say like, we're going to put it down and giving the strategies and, trying to help them make good choices when they're on their own to do it.
Great. Thank you so much. Shay, do you want to add, do you have any advice for teens on how they might be able to strategize to reduce screen time?
I think just like manage it properly, and then they wouldn't experience as many problems with technology, with lack of sleep or anything. So I think that would definitely help.
Great. Well, this is an interesting topic for sure. I know it's one that we have talked about having more discussion around. So Are there any questions for our panel? Oh,
Hi there. See, I think the strategy gets harder and harder as they get older because, you know, you talk about shutting off the Wi-Fi. Well, that doesn't work when you have data on the phones, right? And you get into a physical situation where you have to remove the phone from, you know, a 14-year-old or something like that. But have you got any strategies for older kids? Like, you know, you can reason with them, but I think that's, you know, sometimes limited, right? When they're tied into a lot of social networks with their phones and things like this. So they really don't want to give it up. It's a huge, like it's a double-edged sword because, you know, you've got the social aspect, which is being great through COVID, but particularly this younger generation, they've been overexposed to that, you know, because of COVID and the lack of socialization, they had to use that. It's hard to pry away once that's being started. Have you seen any strategies work with these kids that have been exposed to that through COVID, and any techniques that work to?
So I'll make a quick comment and I'm sure others will have a comment. So one thing just on the data. So just not to say it's the only option, but you turn, in my world, we turn off both. So the data and the internet go off. So, because you're right, there's the data element. But ultimately, yes, you do need to get to a point where they themselves can be making some decisions, which is very hard for kids and teens. And so, you know, again, modeling, having some rules, having downtime. If you can have a period, as Shay was saying, if you can have a period where, you know, that you show them that if you go to sleep at 11 or we turn this off at 12, it actually does result in, you know, like a better night's sleep or showing them ways to do it. But, you know, I think generally a combination of trying to put limits in place as is needed, but then to also be communicating, showing them, trying to have an open line of communication about why it has an impact and what's helpful. And that varies by individuals. So, and you're right, like there was this increase during COVID and it didn't go down. Like we've seen that, like the trends right across the age sectors, it went massively up. And really it stayed up. And so I think at this point, we really are sort of adjusting to that and trying to manage that and kind of put the genie back in the bottle. And it's difficult, and I'm not sure we will to a full degree, but, you know, having families adjust to having less time on screens or figuring out what type of screens is appropriate and how much time is appropriate. I'll let some other people comment. I don't know, Azadeh, do you have any specific recommendations sort of to this, to like older individuals, older teens who have more independent time?
I don't have a recommendation on this, but one thing that I wanted to mention in our studies, we also asked the parents about their feelings. And a lot of the feelings that parents endorsed were things like guilt and judgment. It can be really stressful fighting this screen time battle. And we're constantly hearing how terrible it is for our kids, but we also have to fight it to get it away. So I think it's also important to talk about parental mental health and dealing with those feelings of guilt and the parent shaming that's happening around screen time. So especially as kids get older and we have less and less control over what they do, I think that parental mental health piece is important too.
I'm glad you added that, actually. That's so true.
I mean, I do think, and Alfredo's commented on this, I do think we are in a period where perhaps this is the worst, in that I don't, you know, we were sort of handed this and we didn't have the tools. We're trying to kind of make strategies and tools after the fact. I do hope and see that there will be better education for youth and teens. I also think, and I'd be interested to hear from Shay, I do think that teens and youth and young adults themselves see the problems. Like, I think there are times that they're with their friends and their friend is just on the phone and it's frustrating. And so I think that, you know, there's going to be some new, a new mental health curriculum coming out in Ontario, and I'm privy to some of that. And they do talk a lot about this, how you manage it, what it's like to socialize, and trying to get kids themselves to think about it. You know, decisions that are made by children and youth amongst their friends have a much greater influence than with parents. So I think if we take an approach that's really coming at it at all angles, ideally trying to get a bit more of a balance will be the key. And I think we're just still grappling a little bit on what that looks like perfectly. But I do think that there's going to be some content and in schools in other places to try to help youth and teens think about it at an earlier age and maybe put some better practices and habits in place. Shay, do you feel like your friends or at school, there's some awareness sometimes when like there's too much screen time is actually interfering with other fun things that could be done?
I think there definitely is. That is very true. I think like too much screen time can interfere with how they learn and how they pay attention in class. So I think that definitely has a big impact on that.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, we'll start here then.
So I was wondering from a public health, mental health perspective, whether you've been engaging with the school boards around technology policies within the schools or just tech education awareness, that sort of thing.
So there was some new policies put in place. I was not personally involved with policy advocacy there. I have been involved with some of the materials developed more around education, like how to talk to kids about it, but not around the newer education policy. Asday, I don't know if you want to comment on, yeah.
I know there was the big lawsuit
Yeah.
for social media.
Yeah. So I think that there are efforts, and Alfredo, I think you've done some thinking about this as well, sort of around, developmental like rights and what are the policies, and I think it needs to be multi-layered. Like it has to be with the companies, how they're disseminating information, what safeguards can be put there. There's a real feeling around technology and the internet about sort of unfettered freedoms, and I think exactly that point, policies around it, and even the policies through the schools. Some schools, I have school age kids, one in high school, one in like grade 7, grade 8, and it was interesting to see how they implemented some of these policies. There's no cell phone policy, but I think even by the end of the year, generally, like many places feel like it's not being imposed as strictly as many parents would like.
Okay, question, this gentleman here?
Yeah, so question, I've heard a couple of panelists talk about the words balance and manage. Question I have about screen time, especially for our son, he's really into like certain gaming environments, and those gaming environments can be incredibly immersive and complex, stimulating, enjoyable. Rest, when a speaker was talking about the importance of rest, that's great, but it becomes obsessive. And that's what concern. I'm wondering if the panelists have something on that, that when we as parents might say, okay, that's enough of that video game, they're so immersed, they take your desire to turn it off as a personal affront. It's like, how dare you? This is my world. This is my rest. This is how I recharge. So I'm just wondering if anybody has comments on that.
So 100%. And I think this is a little bit about the difficulties of managing, and it can create a lot of conflict in parents. It can be really frustrating. So often the strategy we recommend is having really clear upfront information about how much time can be spent, what kind of warnings are going to be given to kids, and when. Like a lot of these games intentionally, if you leave at a certain point, it's not just you're not just wrecking the game for you, you're wrecking the game for your team. There's a lot of like, I have to finish this round and it's just going to be 5 minutes, but it's 45 minutes later. Like these are all elements of the games. And so the reality is that you can never avoid conflict around it. It's hard to avoid conflict around it entirely, but having as many upfront conversations and guidelines and warnings as possible, and then ideally having a strategy where you don't have to get embroiled in an argument every time. And so, you have an hour, whatever, to play a game. Now it's going to be, and maybe 15 minutes isn't enough for a round. So maybe try to engage with them. How much time do you need to know that you only have a half an hour left? And then it's going to turn off. And if you can have it turn off automatically, then maybe you don't need to be the one asking them to turn it off if it's too hard. And again, the tricky part is it has to adapt sometimes, and by age and game. But you can both acknowledge that it has benefits to them, that it is their downtime and it is relaxing, and then maybe they are being quite social, but also saying like there's a limit to this, and then we need to shift and do other things. And then if you can come up with a plan together when everyone's calm around what it's going to look like and how much time it is and what's reasonable, it's not going to be a perfect answer, but you might over time just minimize the amount of battles that happen around it. And just try upfront to have the guidelines in place.
You've got the red light.
I do.
I think it's solid over there still. So if you push that button, it'll release.
That's all.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. This question is for Shay. I've been hearing a lot and reading a lot about people choosing lower tech or minimal tech solutions, so that, say, you have a mobile that instead of having a gazillion different means of being immersed in it, maybe it has two or one. Do you see that as a trend, and what are your thoughts on that?
I 100% agree with that. I do see that as a trend, and I think a lot of kids have a lot of like mobile like games on their phones, so that is definitely a trend, especially at my school. So many different apps on kids' phones, so I think that is definitely a trend.
Okay, thank you. Yep.
Susan, I push it. I'm sorry. So I guess for myself, I don't know if it's so much a question. I'm a single parent. All three of my kids are autistic. I definitely have had a heavy reliance on screen time, which I've gotten a lot of negative feedback about, maybe some shame. But I'm curious how much we might be taking into mind, I guess, the future of our kids, in such that if we want them, many of our kids, if they're going to have careers, it's going to kind of be in this field of technology. Like you look at Silicon Valley and the IT department and stuff. And I wonder, I guess I feel like it's important for them to have kind of a fluency in technology, or that they might be left behind when it gets to that. And I guess I'm wondering, like, or not even wondering, but just kind of stating that it's very hard to find that balance between, do you cut them off when they're doing something useful, right? Like my little guy's the one in the picture before, and Abdiki had said that he taught himself the Russian alphabet. Well, he did that online, right? He also taught himself the Greek alphabet, and like a whole bunch of different stuff. And this is all happening online. And he edits videos or intros. He calls them certain thing. I forget what it's called, logo editing, and has a bunch of YouTube followers. And I'm just wondering, I guess I get defensive about people always telling me to cut it down, because I feel like I'm cutting him off from a source that he's growing through. But then at the same time, my oldest son, who moved into supportive living in January, his house is completely offline, no internet, no phone, no nothing. He's like living in like the 1980s. And he's doing amazing, like physically, mentally, but he also has one-on-one staff constantly to take him places. They take him to the gym, they do everything with him. And so I guess I don't even know what my question is. It's more so just like, where do we find the balance, and how do we tell people sometimes just to kind of like back off a little bit and let us kind of follow our values for our children? And I get that that's not maybe a popular opinion, right? But I do think my little guy, his future's in technology, for sure.
I think it's the Wild West right now. So, and again, this goes back to the incentives. The machine can do anything. But when it works, the parents are aligned with the kids through the companies that deliver the tech. So if I had my way, I would have a conversation with YouTube about what kinds of contents, in what proportion they're served, so I can step away from the device and trust that the device is doing good and not harm. Where you have room to judge other people is where you sort of imagine that everybody's doing the bad thing. And it's easy for some parents to say to their kids, stop, and the kid will stop and go grab a ball and play basketball. So of course it's easy to judge like that. And why are these 3 kids over there always on the device? So, but if we manage to make this alignment where the tech companies were in our interest, I don't know if it's, again, the economics argument is that it has to be through legislation. But as long as we can get that some control over the pixels that show up on their screens, then it's probably okay. But this Wild West thing breeds this mentality.
Susan, I just want to comment on that. I think this is not going to be a popular opinion either, but I feel at some point we also need to accept the fact that our societal norms are changing. Our kids' generation is not our generation. But they need to be fluent, but also things are working differently for them, right? Like social connection for them, a lot of it is online now, right? Learning, a lot of it is online. Like my kids learned to read through an app during COVID, right? So it's not popular, but it is happening. Kids are going to be using this all the time. So I think to what everybody's been saying is, how do we just minimize the harms so that we can have those benefits?
And one
I
pickup
have
from
to
there.
add, the cultural evolution or social evolution is happening way faster than natural evolution.
Yes.
That's the problem we have right now.
Yeah, but I will just put, Pat, Susan, I was going to pick yours back because we started there. We started with the positive, and I really just want to reiterate that. There's not one answer for one family, and I think there is lots of benefits. So to your point, not everything is scrolling through TikTok, and I think that kind of activity, the mindless scrolling, should be like, we do need to manage that and limit that. But you made a comment about coding. The reality is that many of us in our jobs sit on screens all day, so it's not all bad. And I do actually think that there are many beneficial ways. So families and parents need to make good choices for them, and definitely everyone, and I think everyone here knows this, but yeah, not to jump to conclusions about what anyone is doing. And we talked about social batteries, and some people's social batteries are much smaller, and so they might need more time. So I think there is no one size fits all. There is lots of benefit. There are lots of careers. Technology is here, and so it's informed consuming is really where we need to get. And it just takes a lot of energy because the consuming's changing all the time. Yeah, so I just wanted to say, it kind of brings us back to the beginning of this conversation where there are pros, there are benefits. It's not a black and white answer, and there's not a one answer for any one family or individual. It's quite nuanced.
Yeah, I just had a question sort of like on the same topic as like the evolution kind of thing, specifically regarding attention span. Especially with like the kind of current new age of like applications such as like TikTok, and I know like Instagram's introducing the new reels and stuff like that, and all these apps are kind of like introducing the short form content where you can kind of just like scroll and get like the instant dopamine effect. Like we probably all heard about this at this point. But I was just like wondering, because I feel like I kind of grew up using more long-term entertainment like YouTube and stuff like that, but I feel like with like TikTok and stuff like that, my entertainment span or like my attention span has like decreased drastically in the short time that I've used these apps. And kids who are growing up with them, like when I grew up with YouTube, kids who are growing up with TikTok now, like, is there any way that their attention span can be like restored somehow or something like that?
It's a great question. I don't have an answer to it. I think a little bit like we've said, it's so early days. That observation for sure, but we don't know yet whether or not, because it feels like for sure people's attention span around some of this technology feels shorter. I am not aware of literature that's looked at it per se, or whether or not it leads into other kinds of activities. I think it's a great question, and it's a little bit like us trying to move fast enough to keep up with the technology. So the short answer is I don't know, and I think people are likely trying to look at it, and we don't know yet if it's like what the tag on effects are for that. Yeah.
I just want to also put, on that note, I don't think it's just the kids, right? Even as adults in our work, we're just exposed to so much information so quickly. So I think it's a societal trend. It's not just the kids. Like I remember when I was in grad school, I had to go to the library and get a paper copy of a paper. Whereas now I just chat GPT it and I get hundreds of answers back, right? So I think this is something that we're all struggling with. It's not just the kids.
Yeah. So can I say something quick for that moment? This is a very astute comment. So we have a little bit of data from the exposure to the very young. So we know in the very young kids, even when you show educational videos, if the pace of presentation is faster than live, real life, it contributes to a somewhat decrease. I mean, the data is not amazing, but it's there. Attention span. So people basically are saying that when the pace of the electronics does not match the pace of the non-virtual world, our attention spans may be shrinking a little bit. My only pushback to this and to this whole conversation, actually, because we do go back to either loving it or demonizing it, and was at this point from the beginning and the framing that Dr. Crosby did is that these things are tools, right? First of all, they're not bad, they're not good. We can do good, we can do bad. But also to remember, good is a cultural decision. It is not some abstract moral value that exists outside of us, right? So to Susan's point, we may decide that we take as a society a shorter attention span for the benefit of having a gaming population that makes good money out of having neurodivergent population that makes good money out of gaming, right? But as long as we know what we are trading off, right? It's about having truly transparent conversations about the trade-offs. And your generation may decide that you don't care about some stuff that we thought were critical to well-being of people, right? We had made that decision. Young generation may make a different decision, but you need to know what you're trading, right? And that becomes then, that's how new norms get developed. So it's important to, even when we think about attention spans shrinking and all of that, it's not a necessarily bad thing. If what you get out of it is a better thing, but it's a good thing that you're thinking about that, right? Like that you're thinking that there is a trade-off.
Oh, hi. My question is it true that children or students should have no more than 2 hours per day of total screen time, including TV and other kind of electronic devices? Because studies have shown that excessive screen use may lead to a decline in IQ. If so, how might this affect children or students who have already been diagnosed with a low IQ? Thank you.
So there are the Canadian Pediatric Association, the guidelines over 6 are 2 hours per day. I think,
Nobody's complying.
No, that's what, sorry. That's what I was going to say. I thought I had it wrong. But I think a little to our conversation, it depends on how you define that. Because there's lots of kids who are using screens responsibly for school or learning information. So then the question would be, does that count for the 2 hours? So there are guidelines, the 2 hours is correct, but I don't think it's not a useful guideline because I think many people can't live within it. I think, or we know from some of the literature, I haven't looked explicitly at IQ per se, or whether or not our research is so fine-tuned that you could make comments specifically about different developmental ranges. And anything in excess is problematic. Excessive screen time is is definitely problematic. But other things that are excessive are also problematic. Not to be controversial, but excessive exercise can be problematic as well. I think screen time has become or the use of technologies has become so prevalent that we do need to be thinking about how to manage it well. And I'm sure right across the developmental age ranges and cognitive ranges, there's beneficial ways to use screens and not so much. For sure, if individuals are missing out on education or socializing or activities that may benefit language development or cognitive development, that's going to be problematic. But as long as they're getting those kinds of stimulations at an appropriate level that they can manage, some screen time within that can be managed well. So again, it's not such a black and white answer, but definitely if somebody was in the situation where screens were being used more than they should be to supervise or provide content, then it could potentially get problematic. So again, a little bit of an individualized answer.
On the IQ point, we've heard from parents that they have perceived benefits. And again, we haven't actually done the study, but we've heard from parents that they've perceived benefits of screen time in terms of cognitive development, in terms of language development. Some parents even report motor development from all the gaming that's happening. So definitely an interesting area to do future studies.
And some of the things are really engaging, right? Like reading, there's some really great reading engaging games that are much more, you can use responsibly, and I think it can be used in like the multi-sensory, it can be very motivating. I do some research on VR, and we're really trying to use that as a way to be engaging. Kids like it, to be doing some tasks that are kind of hard for them. So I think to parents and to researchers, we're really like trying to think about how we can increase the benefits and figure out how to mitigate the more negative elements while acknowledging that it's here, and just turning it off with rare exceptions is not necessarily like a long-term option in general.
Okay, this is a quick point. I think we have to speak to the potential of this tech. I remember watching my son play Minecraft. That was his first game, and thinking, my God, you can diagnose. You can diagnose in math. These are data. If you observe the behavior, the types of behavior, the preferred behaviors, that's a gigantic tool, and all the tech companies are sitting on this. So definitely a double-edged sword.
We've got 2 online questions, and then I'm worried about time. This is a hot topic.
Background information, my son had ADHD and becomes hyper-focused. Two things that interest him, so we're very concerned about video games, but it's a struggle as his peers are playing. My husband and I work in the field with youngsters, and we're very concerned with what we're seeing with students' decline in motivation. Do anything but game and social for our son, but not everyone's on the same page.
I mean, I think that there's no absolute answer. Definitely for some kids, it becomes so difficult to disengage that families may choose to make decisions about that. You may make a decision that there's no screens or video games, say during the week, and maybe there's something on a weekend. If there's value in the video games socially, ensuring that when they happen, it involves something social can be important. Like perhaps friends come over and they play it together. So, again, I think each family needs to make a decision. And if there's, it's the negatives against the positives. So if there's positive social elements, and if they feel like legitimately that social piece is being impinged, then figuring out a way to have it where that part is present and beneficial, that's the key. But, I think different families, I had a family tell me recently or someone shared it with me, about VR. We do some work in VR, and they thought it was great. They got one for their youth, and like within 2 or 3 days, they were like, this has to go, because they're so attracted to this technology. And the whole family agreed that for that, it needed to go. Not to say that it was all VR, but there's different kinds of games. So I think there's different variations in how sensitive individuals are. And so I definitely, we've had families who've had to really cut back for those reasons. And I think that's reasonable. And just again, if there's something beneficial, figure out what that is and how to implement it responsibly in a way that's manageable and isn't causing significant stress to the family, because that's what's the worst. It's the stress, the fighting, the arguing that creates difficulty and conflict.
So 2 quick points on this one. So I think not all video games are created equally. So it depends which video game we're talking about. And I'm guessing they're not talking about the educational type in this question. But the other thing that's really important to think about is some of these video games have become such an important fabric of the socialization for our kids. So by taking it away, are we taking away a shared interest with the other kids? And are we from a social perspective, are we isolating them from other kids in their social group? So that's another thing that we need to balance, I think, with video games.
Was there another online question? Okay, great. Another question.
Sorry for
here.
those waiting, but I absolutely promise this last question here.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
First of all, thank you. And thank you, panel, for this lovely discussion. It's very important to talk about screen time, especially in this day and age. And it's a topic that really resonates with me because I'm a person living with ADHD, the capital H. And I have a love-hate relationship with the internet, right? On one hand, I've got so much like learning because I learned how to do multimedia like photography, video editing. And so it really nourished my creativity. But on the other hand, I do have an obsessive personality. And during COVID, especially, we went online. I was very obsessed with the internet and really fell down like a deep rabbit hole. And I would say like maybe from my personal reflection of what helped me recover and find more balance has been, first noticing my own feelings like, oh, I don't feel good. My mental health is deteriorating and I want to change. I want help. And it kind of goes back to the whole cliche that we can't change someone if they don't want to, right? We think we can change someone or a person. We can't. We think we can't change ourselves, but we can. And so what the strategies that I guess that has helped me, one, there's this a resource online called the Internet and Technology Anonymous. It's kind of like Alcoholic Anonymous, but for the internet. And there's a whole community, like a support group, helping, sharing resources and tools. And I think it's so powerful, like the 12 steps. Number two, I think the mindset shifts that really helped me was also shifting away from the restricting and the removing, but more about adding. What can I add to have more social interactions or to connect with nature? I really appreciate my parents because they added hiking into our daily routine or weekly routines. We would go on nature walks. And I feel like those things really helped me spend less time staring on the screen like a zombie and actually be a human being and be alive. And also, I'll say books. Books has also been a tremendous, I'm still consuming, but it's just a slower pace of consumption that I feel like our brains can handle more rather than the digital deluge of quick 30-second clips that don't really stick, right? You watch it, but you're like, what was the reason for that 30 minutes, right? So yeah, I think maybe the question is more about what can we add as opposed to restrict. And I guess I'm curious about your thoughts and if anything resonates. Yeah.
Shay, what do you add to your life that's not screen time? Is that
Yeah.
like rather than like let's turn off the screen, let's do something different or more fun that's just different than screens?
Definitely. For me, I think, going outside just for some fresh air really helps other than screens, or hanging out in person with my friends rather than just sitting inside all day, just looking directly at a screen. Because I think, specifically in this generation, we rely on screens for a lot of different uses. And I think anything other than screens can be really helpful for a lot of kids, not just myself or my brother. It really helps a lot of kids.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Alfred?
I was going to say we have a dog and a cat, and that's a recommendation right there.
And that feels like a good place to end this discussion, but I think we'll be taking this up with the Pond PAC committee and talking about how can we continue to engage in this topic. Thank you. Thank you to our panel.